All right, so turn then to the second, part of Hobbes's argument, the part that we've labeled the solution. Right? If we pop back to this PowerPoint I've already shown you quickly, I mean, here's the basic idea, right? Basic idea involves, you have to write this down again, making a contract to trade away our liberty in return for security. To see, though, how Hobbes articulates this idea, what you've got to do is you've got to get clear about these crucial concepts, these two additional of nature concepts, the concept of a law of nature and a right of nature. We can pop away from the slide now. So they're actually, they're going to be actually sort of, well, three distinct crucial of nature concepts in Hobbes and a further potential source of confusion. Okay, so the three of nature concept, we've already encountered the concept of a state of nature. That's a situation with no government or common power, right? And that's key in, I mean, that's a key concept that's used in the articulation of the key claim in what we've just been looking at, the problem, the claim that the state of nature is a state of war, right? There are then these two other distinct of nature concepts, the concept of a law of nature and of the right of nature, that play key roles in the solution. Yeah. So you have to, distinguish both of those from each other and from the concept of the state of nature. There is the further attendant complication, and I'll draw your attention to this again in a little bit. But there's a further attendant complication that Hobbes both gives you a definition of the concept law of nature in general, and articulates a number. It's a high prime number less than 20. I think it's 19, but it might be 17. Specific laws of nature, that is, specific laws that sort of fall under this general definition. All right, so in articulating the solution then, let's begin, as Hobbes does, with these further crucial of nature concepts. We'll take them actually in the opposite order from the way Hobbes takes them. Let's begin with the concept of a law of nature. This is sort of the third paragraph in our extract from chapter 14 under the heading, A Law of Nature What? Hobbes writes, a law of nature, lex naturalis, that's the Latin term for reasons we talked about, right? A law of nature, lex naturalis, is a precept or general rule found out by reason, by which a man is forbidden to do that which is destructive of his life, or taketh away the means of preserving the same, and to omit that by which he thinketh it may be best preserved. So, Hobbes' concept of a law of nature then has sort of two key components. First off, a law of nature it's a rule of reason, right? It's a requirement of, to put it slightly different, it's a requirement of rationality, right? Something that you've got to follow on pain of being irrational, right? And what's it tell you to do? It tells you to do whatever it takes to preserve your life. One thing that means is, at this point, in defining this key concept, Hobbes is in effect committing himself to a distinctive version of ethical egoism, right? It's a version of ethical egoism because it tells you all you need to be concerned about is your life, not anyone else's, right? It's a distinctive version of ethical egoism because it tells you that you need to be concerned only about your life and not about, your happiness or anything else. Right? But a version of ethical egoism is what it is, right? Yeah, we actually don't need the PowerPoint yet. I was just checking it. Cool. Right. We'll come back to that in a bit when I've got them all done. All right, so that's the concept of a law of nature. The other key general of nature concept which he introduces here, and it's going to play a key role in the solution, is the concept of the right of nature. And it is introduced in the very first paragraph in chapter 14, right? Under the heading Right of Nature What? Hobbes says, the right of nature, which writers commonly call jus naturale, is the liberty each man hath to use his own power as he will himself for the preservation of his own nature, that is to say, of his own life, and consequently of doing anything which in his own judgment and reason he shall conceive to be the aptest means thereunto. So, the right of nature is the freedom or liberty to do whatever it is that you need to do to preserve your life. To do whatever it takes to preserve your life. Now, I mean, there's obviously there's a common element sort of shared by the concepts of a law of nature and of the right of nature, right? You might call this common element this sort of shared content, right? The idea of doing whatever it takes to preserve your life. But, as Hobbes himself explains in a crucial way, the concepts are different by definition. And, as we'll see in just a little bit, they play crucially different roles in the solution. Right? Start with the way in which they're different in definition. Right? Hobbes talks about this in the second sentence of the law of nature paragraph. He writes, for though they that speak of this subject used to confound, that's tend to confuse, jus and lex, right and law, they ought to be distinguished, because right consisteth in liberty to do or to forbear, whereas law determineth and bindeth to one of them, so that law and right differ as much as obligation and liberty, which in one and the same matter are inconsistent. So Hobbes there says, look, the right of nature, that is a liberty, it's a permission. To say you have the right of nature is to say you have the right to, you are allowed to do whatever it takes to preserve your life. That's very different from the law of nature, because the law of nature is not a permission, it's a requirement, right? Definition of a law of nature is it's a requirement of reason that you have to do whatever it takes to preserve your life. And as Hobbes says, these differ in the way, obligation and liberty, right? Requirement and permission differ. So in that basic respect, so though they have, as it were, the same content, right? They have a different, I guess the right technical term would be deontic force. But I mean, you know what it refers to here. One of them's permission, one of them's requirement. Yeah? All right. So I think now I am ready for the slide. So this is three different of nature concepts in Hobbes, right? The concept of the state of nature that we saw was crucial in the earlier argument, and these two latter of nature concepts used in the latter half of the argument. All right. So we've already talked about the way in which the latter two concepts are sort of different in terms of their definition. They'll also, as we can go on to see in just a sec, play very different roles in his solution, in his sort of story of the way that you can make a deal to get yourself out of the state of nature. There's just one further thing that we have to bring out before we're in a position to look at the heart of that story. This further thing comes out in the next paragraph from where we were. Let's see, is that right? It's the next one from where we were. I guess it's the one after the paragraph where he defines the law of nature, right? Under the heading, naturally every man has right to everything. In that paragraph, Hobbes writes, and because the condition of man, as has been declared in the precedent chapter, is a condition of war of everyone against everyone, in which case everyone is governed by his own reason, and there is nothing he can make use of that may not be a help unto him in preserving his life against his enemies. It followeth that in such a condition every man has a right to everything, even to one another's body. So Hobbes there argues that the right of nature amounts to, a right to everything, a right to all things, including other people's bodies. Hobbes scholars worry sometimes about how good that argument is. For our purposes, actually, we don't need to worry about that. The only reason we need to pay attention to this paragraph is we need to see that when, just a little bit later, Hobbes refers to the right to all things or the right to everything. That's just another way of referring to the right of nature, given what he's argued here. Okay. All right, so then, armed with these concepts, Hobbes is going to sketch the solution, sketch the way in which you can make a deal to get yourself out of this terrible state of nature. Right? The key concepts are going to play very different roles. Right? On the one hand, the laws of nature are going to be the things that tell you to make the deal and sort of specify the terms of the deal. On the other, the right of nature is going to be the thing that you trade away in making the deal. It's sort of going to be, as it were, the currency in terms of which the deal is made. So what Hobbes then does at this point is he introduces these more specific laws of nature, particularly the first two, right, that articulate first or the need for such a deal and then its basic terms, right. As I said earlier, it's sort of this further distinction here, right, between, on the one hand, the general definition of a law of nature, and then on the other hand, these specific laws of nature that fall under that general definition, right. And it's the first two laws of nature that are most crucial for getting the basic character of Hobbes' story here straight. Right. So begin with the first, or as it's labelled here, fundamental law of nature. This is the next paragraph from where we were. Hobbes writes, and consequently it is a precept or general rule of reason, that is, given our earlier definition, it is a law of nature, right, that every man ought to endeavour peace as far as he has hope of obtaining it, and when he cannot obtain it, that he may seek and use all helps and advantages of war. So So that's the first law of nature, right? And it has two parts. Okay? It says, on the one hand, seek peace if you can get it. On the other, if you can't get peace, do whatever it takes to defend yourself. The second law of nature then sort of derives from this first one, right? It tells you more specifically how to go about seeking peace. It's, in effect, it's one of the two places in the Leviathan where the terms of the social contract are sort of sketched out or articulated. So under the heading, the second law of nature, next paragraph, Hobbes writes, from this fundamental law of nature, by which men are commanded to endeavour peace, is derived this second law, that a man be willing, when others are so too, as far forth as for peace and defence of himself he shall think it necessary, to lay down this right to all things, and be contented with so much liberty against other men as he would allow other men against himself. So, what Hobbes there says is, you should be prepared to put aside your right to all things, that is your right of nature. Trade it away if other people are prepared to do it too. So, I mean, here you see, right, the two key concepts, you know, the concept of law of nature and of right of nature playing these different roles, right? So this second law of nature is the thing that sort of tells you to make the deal, what deal to make, right? It's a deal, and the deal it tells you to make is the deal that tells you to give up the right of nature, right? You should be prepared to give up this right of nature, this right to all things, to restrict your liberty, right? And what you gain is a kind of security, right? By giving up your right to other people's bodies, they give up their right to yours, and everyone thereby ends up better off. Those then are, I mean, they're the two most important laws of nature that Hobbes articulates. As I said, he does articulate, I'm pretty confident it's 17 more. The third one I've also included, this is a little bit later in your extract. The third law of nature, this is under the heading, the third law of nature, justice, and this is the first paragraph actually from chapter 15. Third law of nature is interesting because what Hobbes here is responding to is a genuine worry, right? I mean, the genuine worry is it may be in your advantage, to your advantage to sort of make an agreement, but then having made it, not to keep it, right? The third law of nature tries to deal with that worry, right? Third law of nature is this law that tells you, as you see there, to perform your covenants made, right? It tells you that if you made an agreement, you got to keep it. You see after that there are some dots, some ellipses, right? And, you know, between those dots and the next bit I've given you is the there are all these other laws of nature, right? The other, I'm either 14 or 16, but I'm pretty confident it's 16. Right? And it doesn't matter that much. These are other, various more specific laws covering things like arbitration procedures and being prepared to forgive people and various things like that. Right? Interesting to look at in the original, but more than we have time to focus on here. Right? The final thing I want to notice is Hobbes' sort of explicit identification of morality with these laws of nature. That comes out in the final section I've included in this little extract, though it comes out a little obliquely, right? I mean, really all we need of this final section to make the point here is the heading in the first sentence, right? The heading is, the science of these laws is the true moral philosophy. And, under the heading, Hobbes says pretty much the same thing in the first sentence. He says, and the science of them, that's the laws of nature, is the true and only moral philosophy. Right? The point here then is that, in effect, Hobbes is identifying morality with the laws of nature. Right? The identification is, as I say, made a little obliquely or indirectly here, because it's made by telling you that the science of the laws of nature is the true and only moral philosophy. That is, the study of the laws of nature is the same as the study of morality, right? And then to get the equation between morality and the laws of nature, you sort of remove the study of bit from each side of the equation, and then you see that for Hobbes, morality just consists of these laws of nature. So then, that's the second half of Hobbes' argument, right? That's Hobbes' way of telling a story about how you can make a deal to get yourself out of the state of nature, to set up these moral rules, the following of which makes everyone better off. So, a picture according to which moral rules are the product of a mutually beneficial agreement. And I think that's a pretty good place to stop for today, so let's do that.